For almost 12 years, the Wasteland had only one heartbeat that still dared to echo across its cracked ground, the heartbeat of a man named Jeb Callahan, the rancher who lived alone on the edge of nowhere. His ranch wasn't a ranch anymore. It was a scattered memory made of abandoned barns, rusted windmills, and fences leaning like tired old men, ready to give up but somehow still standing. Jeb lived in silence not because he enjoyed it, but because the silence was the only thing that didn't ask him questions. He had once been a man of laughter, a man of company, a man who greeted every sunrise with the belief that life would only get better. But life is a sharp-edged beast, and 12 years ago, it cut him in half when he lost the only family he ever had. Since then, the Wasteland became his church, his prison, and his promise to never feel again. Every morning, Jeb saddled his old horse, Bandit, and rode the same path through the barren dunes, checking traps, collecting scrap, and hoping, though he would never admit it, that maybe something out there would give him a reason to speak again. But the Wasteland rarely gave anything except heat and disappointment, until one afternoon when the sun was crawling down the horizon like a wounded animal, and the wind carried the scent of danger. Jeb heard something he had not heard in years, a scream. It was faint, tangled with the wind, and almost lost to the empty world. But it was real. Bandit's ears shot upward, and for the first time in a decade, Jeb's heart slammed against his ribs like it wanted to come alive again. He kicked the horse forward, racing toward the noise, dust rising behind him like a ghost chasing his shadow. As he approached the old iron ravine, the scream came again, this time clearer, desperate, filled with a terror that could cut stone. And then he saw her, a girl no older than 16, dangling by a frayed rope from a metal beam, stretched over the ravine, her hands bound, her face pale as moonlight, her hair whipping in the hunger of the winds. Her feet kicked helplessly above the sharp rocks below. She was seconds from losing her grip. Jeb's breath froze. In 12 years of solitude, nothing had cracked his spirit. But this shattered it like glass. He leaped off his horse, grabbed his coil of rope, and anchored himself to the old steel pillar. "Hold on!" he shouted, the words feeling foreign in his throat, cracking like an unused tool. The girl's eyes snapped open at the sound of another human voice, her hope flaring like a spark in a world of ashes. Jeb climbed down the metal framework, the beam trembling beneath him. The rope fibers above the girl were snapping one by one. He reached her just as the rope gave its final cry. He seized her wrist and slammed his boot into a support beam, taking her full weight onto his back. The impact nearly threw them both into the ravine, but Jeb held on, gritting through the pain until he dragged her to safety. The girl collapsed, shaking violently, and Jeb knelt beside her, unsure of what to say. She finally whispered, her voice broken but alive, "They're coming." That was the moment Jeb Callahan realized his lonely wasteland was no longer empty. Something had entered it, something dangerous, something hunting, something that had left this girl to die. And for the first time in 12 years, Jeb's silence ended, because now he had someone to protect, and something to fight against. Jeb carried the girl, whose name he learned was Mira, back to his ranch before nightfall, but the sky was already bleeding purple, the wind carrying a strange whistle that didn't belong to nature. Mira clung to him the entire ride, shivering even though the heat still clung to the air. When they reached his cabin, her eyes darted across every corner, analyzing shadows the way a wounded animal checks for predators. Jeb offered her water, but she pushed it aside, whispering, "They poison the springs. Don't drink anything that isn't from a sealed can." Her voice trembled with certainty, and Jeb felt the old instinct of caution crawl up his spine. As the lantern flickered, Mira finally spoke, really spoke, and what she said chilled Jeb more than the coldest midnight the Wasteland had ever laid upon him. She told him about a group that roamed the Wasteland, men who called themselves the Cleansers, a cult of scavengers who believed the world belonged only to those strong enough to take it. They kidnapped wanderers, stripped settlements, hunted survivors, and anyone they saw as weak, they used as bait or leverage. Mira had escaped them once, and for that, they hung her over the ravine to die slowly, starved by fear and wind. Jeb listened silently, but inside him something ancient and furious was waking up. Part of himself he had buried with his family. But Mira had more to reveal. She told him about strange symbols the cleansers carved into rocks, about fires that burned green at night, about a sound like metal screaming that followed them wherever they went. And she was certain of one thing. They knew she survived. The cleansers did not leave unfinished business. While Mira rested, Jeb stepped outside into the cooling night. The wasteland stretched endlessly, a black ocean of dunes and abandoned wreckage. But tonight, it felt different, like something was watching the ranch from beyond the horizon. Bandit nervously stamped the dirt, snorting at the shadows. Jeb felt a silent message echo across the dark. You are not alone anymore. He returned inside, locked the doors, and sat beside the girl who had fallen asleep on his old couch. Her breathing was shallow but peaceful. For the first time in a decade, there was another heartbeat in his home. But peace in the wasteland did not survive long. Hours later, long after midnight, a thunderous thud hit the side of Jeb's barn, followed by another. And another, Bandit screamed. Mira jolted awake, her voice a knife of fear. They found me. Jeb grabbed his old rifle, the one he had vowed never to use again, the one he swore he'd laid to rest with his rage. But tonight his rage needed to breathe. He stepped outside, and what he saw made the rifle tremble in his hands. Figures, 6 of them, standing in a loose formation near the barn. They wore animal skulls over their heads, their bodies wrapped in rusted armor, their boots leaving deep scars in the dirt. The leader stepped forward, tapping a metal pipe against his palm, the sound hollow and mocking. We want the girl, he rasped, and we know she's alive. Jeb felt his jaw tighten. 12 years ago, he might have handed the girl over to avoid trouble. But the man who lived in silence had died the moment he heard Mira scream in that ravine. He raised the rifle, the wood pressing firmly into his shoulder. Come and take her, he growled. The leader laughed, a sound like gravel grinding bone. If you want to die for her, old man, we'll make it quick. But the wasteland had taught Jeb a different lesson. Nothing was quick and nothing was easy. He fired a warning shot that shattered a metal bucket beside the cleansers. For a moment there was stillness, then chaos erupted. They charged, screaming beneath their skull masks. Jeb fired again, hitting one in the leg, dropping him into the dust. Another threw a spear that grazed Jeb's shoulder, but he didn't flinch. The rancher fought like a man who had lost everything and refused to lose again. Mira appeared behind him, holding a broken lantern, her hands shaking but her determination fierce. She smashed it against the leader's mask, flames engulfing the bone helmet. The man stumbled backward, howling, rolling in the dirt. The others hesitated, thrown off by the girl who refused to die. And in that hesitation, Jeb gave them something to fear. He fired a final shot into the air, shouting with a voice that echoed across the wasteland. This ranch is under my protection. Come again, and every one of you dies. The cleansers dragged away their injured and fled into the dunes, shouting threats that melted into the night. When the last of them disappeared, Jeb finally dropped to his knees, exhausted, wounded, but alive. Mira rushed to him, tears streaking through the dust on her face. You saved me, she whispered. Jeb shook his head weakly. No, you gave me something to fight. 4. Dawn crept over the wasteland, like a timid hope. Jeb knew the cleansers would return, but now he wasn't alone. He had someone to protect,